All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dig into something really fascinating from our source material. How did some of Christianity's most core beliefs actually evolve over centuries of debate and conflict?
So let's just dive right in with a big one. The question on the screen: did the earliest Christians believe in the Trinity exactly as it's defined today? You might think the answer is a simple yes or no, but when you actually look at the historical sources, it gets complicated.
Okay, so let's actually trace this journey. We're going to follow the breadcrumbs of Christian doctrine, starting with what our sources describe as this, simple, early faith, and follow it all the way to these high-stakes, politically charged councils that literally forged modern Christianity.
All right, so our investigation is going to kick off with something really fundamental: the nature of creation itself. The source material we're looking at suggests that the early church's whole understanding of how the universe began was actually pretty different from what many people believe today.
Yeah, this idea, creation ex nihilo, a fancy Latin term for creation out of nothing, it's a total cornerstone for a lot of Christians now. But, and this is the key, our source material shows it wasn't the original view at all. It was something that actually developed over time, mostly as a defense against some other competing ideas.
And here's a perfect example. We've got a quote from Justin Martyr, a really prominent early Christian leader. And look at what he says. "We have been taught that he, in the beginning, created out of formless matter." So he's describing creation not from nothing, but from pre-existing stuff. Honestly, that sounds a lot closer to the language you actually find in Genesis 1, right? So what on earth forced this change? Why move away from this idea of organizing matter? Well, it seems to have been a reaction to some serious external pressures. You had new philosophies, new religious movements popping up, and they were challenging the early church, basically forcing it to get way more precise about what it believed.
And that brings us to this really crucial intersection: faith crashing right into philosophy. See, to defend their beliefs in this big Greco-Roman world, early Christian thinkers started grabbing the tools right out of the Greek philosophy toolbox: the language, the concepts, all of it.
And we're not talking about just passively borrowing ideas. You have leaders like Origen of Alexandria who are openly arguing that philosophy was essential to really understanding Christian truth. It basically became this new lens for reading and interpreting the scriptures. And this is where it gets really interesting because it illustrates a huge paradox. On one hand, they totally embraced Greek philosophical concepts, words like substance and essence, because they were useful for hammering out the complex doctrine of the Trinity. But on the other hand, they actively fought against the Greek idea of eternal matter. Why? To develop this brand new doctrine of creation ex nihilo.
So where did this creation from nothing idea really come from? It looks like it emerged in large part to fight back against Gnosticism. That was this big rival belief system that basically taught matter was evil and was created by some kind of flawed lesser god. So by arguing that the one, supreme God, created matter itself, Christians could make this really powerful statement about the goodness of the physical world. It was a theological counterpunch.
Okay, so you got to understand, these ideas didn't just pop up overnight or without a fight. No way. They were intensely debated, they were fought over. This was serious stuff. And eventually, they were codified over several centuries of controversy.
This timeline really lays out what our source material describes as this gradual, very human-driven process of systematizing faith. And remember, this wasn't happening in some quiet theological library. A lot of this was driven by intense political pressure from Roman emperors, who were just desperate for some kind of religious unity across their massive, chaotic empire.
So here's the kicker. Even Orthodox Christian historians, people like Jan D. Kelly, who are quoted here, they totally acknowledge this. They'll tell you that core doctrines like the Trinity were hammered out over centuries of debate and conflict. And they'll also tell you, as he does here, that it's just not explicitly found in the New Testament. It's a product of this long developmental process that happened after the biblical era.
Right, so the whole stated goal of these big councils was to create unity, to get everyone on the same page. But let's be real. If we look at the Christian world today, did they actually achieve that goal? Look at this. Today, there are literally thousands of different Christian denominations all over the world, every single one with its own take on Scripture, its own ideas about authority and doctrine. It kind of seems like that absolute unity the early councils were chasing is still pretty elusive.
And this is where we get to a really fascinating problem that our source material highlights. To try and bridge all these divides, you'll often hear the argument that, oh, well, we all agree on the essentials. But that just kind of kicks the can down the road, doesn't it? Because the next logical question is, who gets to decide what's essential?
So to really drive this essentials problem home, our source material points to a specific case. It brings up what it sees as a contradiction. You've got all this doctrinal diversity inside mainstream Christianity, right? But then the LDS Church is often treated as something totally separate, even though, as this table shows, it affirms these same core beliefs. They just do it with added scripture and some extra clarification. So where do you draw the line?
Okay, so after laying out this whole centuries-long puzzle of doctrinal drift and disunity, what's the resolution that our source material puts forward? Well, it all comes down to one idea: restoration.
The logic, from this perspective, goes something like this. Step 1. After the original apostles died, that direct, authoritative divine guidance was lost. Step 2. Chaos. Doctrinal confusion starts to creep in, and it's heavily influenced by philosophy and politics. Step 3. The restoration. This is the claim that prophetic and apostolic authority was brought back through Joseph Smith, which leads to Step 4. Clarity. This restored authority provides a mechanism, a way to get doctrinal unity and correct those past errors.
So, when you boil it all down, the framework being presented here is that a key piece of the puzzle was missing for centuries: living prophetic authority. The argument is that its return offers a direct path to the kind of doctrinal unity that those early councils were striving for, but as history clearly shows, just couldn't fully lock down and maintain. And that whole journey through the source material leaves us right here, with this final, really provocative question to think about. If history, with all its philosophy and politics, shaped the faith of yesterday, what forces, and maybe more importantly, what authority, is shaping the faith of tomorrow? Something to think about.